The topic which we have chosen for this session or this lecture, it is on Islamic banking and finance in Pakistan in a global context. I think it's important to look into the phenomenon of Islamic banking itself, and then in a national context. And of course, we should be interested in what is happening in Islamic banking and finance worldwide. Only then we would be able to take a meaningful view on Islamic banking and finance. So in the next 90 minutes, I would be sharing some of my thoughts on the topic. But before that, just a brief few seconds introduction of myself. I'm Humayun Dar, and as it was mentioned in the introduction, I am serving as Director General of Cambridge Institute of Islamic Finance. I have been involved in Islamic banking and finance industry for the last 25 years. And those of you who are interested in knowing more about me and my works, you can Google me. So if you Google Humayun Dar, or if you go to Wikipedia, my page, that would give you some information about me, my background, and my works in Islamic banking and finance. So let me the provocative statement. Islamic banking is a fraud. This is something we would come across very frequently. And I can share with you one incident. I was in Abu Dhabi, I think it was about 10 years back, with one of my colleagues at Deutsche Bank. It was actually more than 10 years back. And we were going to this one client Islamic bank of ours. I would not name it. And the cab driver happens to be a Pakistani Pathan guy with long beard, like Sher Jan has got. So he, when he overheard us talking about Islamic banking, he intervened, and he told my friend, my colleague, in his typical Pathan style, "Ye Islamic banking fraud hai." This is what he said. Okay, and I intervened and I said, "Aisi baat nahi hai." And his reaction to my interjection was, "Ji, aapko kya pata hai?" Right? And this is actually a kind of general perception about Islamic banking and finance. So people would like to have their views on this phenomenon. This one gentleman on the right-hand side of the screen, you will see an image of a book which was published, I think, in 2004 by this guy called Dr. Muhammad Salim. Okay. And he entitled the book, Islamic Banking, a 300 Billion Deception. Okay. At that time, his estimate of the size of the industry was 300 billion. Although even in 2004, the size of the industry was about 600 billion. But that shows that his understanding, his awareness of the industry was rather limited. And he came up with this book, which got attraction of a lot of people. Recently, I saw this one YouTube by this one Indian guy, an Indian Muslim who is making a lot of noise about a lot of things. And he referred to this book. Okay. And he said, "Oh, Islamic banking is a big sham." Okay. And this is a view taken by even about 75% of general public. We have been involved in a number of surveys on the attitude of Muslims or general public towards Islamic banking and finance. About 10 years back, actually, we did a survey for State Bank of Pakistan, which was sponsored by that time Department for International Development, DFID, which has since been renamed. And in that study, we found that although there was huge demand for Islamic banking and finance in the country, but in terms of awareness, about 3/4 of the surveyed people, they had this negative view on Islamic banking and finance. People were not entirely sure if Islamic banking was actually Islamic. Okay. And because of that, people tend to take this view that Islamic banking is a fraud. And we are going to look into it, whether this is a fraud or this is something more substantial than that. I would share this quotation. Okay. And I think this is probably more realistic than the first one. Okay. This is by someone. I would tell the guy, who is this person? Let's be honest to ourselves. Despite all the contractual maneuvering, Islamic banking is at the core of it still all about money lending. This is a quotation which was sent to me by this one Irish guy. And he sending this quotation, and he said, oh, a very realistic statement. And he reminded me that this was a statement which I gave about 4 or 5 years back, and I had forgotten about it. This was in one of my articles. So I believe that Islamic banking and finance is not a fraud. It's not based on any ill kind of intentions, but it has similarities with conventional banking and finance. And because of that, a lot of people would have a negative view on it. A friend of mine who is an Englishman, okay, he works for an English law firm, and he is a globally recognized legal expert on Islamic finance. So once this question was asked to him on the authenticity of Islamic banking and finance, and his answer was very apt. He said if Islamic banking was same as conventional banking, then all the banks would have been practicing Islamic banking. If that is not the case, this means Islamic banking is actually different from conventional banking. The reason HBL has its HBL Islamic separate from its conventional business, this means that there is a difference between the two. The reason that MCB actually set up a subsidiary Islamic bank called MCB Islamic Bank, this shows that there is a difference between the two. If we cannot see the difference, it's not because there is no difference, it's actually on the problem lies on our end. We are not sufficiently aware of the technicalities and the technical differences of Islamic banking and finance from the conventional Islamic banking and finance, or conventional banking and finance. So for the time being, okay, let's assume that Islamic banking and finance is not a fraud. It is similar to conventional banking and finance. However, it is different from conventional banking and finance. Now, in this presentation, I would like to, after this brief kind of introduction, I would like to look at the state of affairs of Islamic banking and finance globally. What is happening all over the world? And in this global context, where does Pakistan stand? Okay. And of course, we would take our conversation to the next level on the differences between Islamic and conventional banking. Let's look into this fundamental question first before we go into the global state of affairs of Islamic banking and finance. I think it's a very fundamental question. Is interest prohibited? If we have an affirmative answer to this question, then we would be able to understand Islamic banking better. If our answer is no, interest is not prohibited. And a lot of people, by the way, they have this view that the modern time interest as practiced by banks and financial institutions is not what the Quran or Islam prohibited in the name of riba. So their view is riba is not synonymous with interest. Hence, they would say interest is not prohibited. And we would like to say a few words about this one. So, is interest prohibited in Islam? One view is yes, riba is prohibited in the Quran and interest is riba. Okay. This is a view which religious class of the country, in case of Pakistan, or religious class in general would take. Other people, they might say that modern times interest is not riba, which is prohibited in the Quran, i.e., riba, which is prohibited in the Quran, is not exactly the same thing as the interest being practiced by banks in modern times. A middle ground could be yes, interest is prohibited in Islam, but we cannot survive without interest in modern times. Hence, this is a necessity. Principle of necessity kicks in. My own view is that riba is prohibited in the Quran, and interest, whatever form it takes in modern times, this is covered in this prohibition. Okay. Those who say that no, modern times interest is not riba, their understanding of riba and interest is rather limited, and they should make themselves more aware of the issues involved. They should educate themselves to come up with a more realistic view on the prohibition of riba/interest. Those who say that, it is prohibited, however, it is impossible, nearly impossible to survive without interest, again, they don't know which world they are living in. Okay. Their view is very limited, it's a localized one, and it's a backward view they take. When in 2013, I share my own views with you. Okay, in 2013, when the previous PLN government came into power, I was invited by the country representative of Asian Development Bank in Islamabad. And the guy said, the new government is going to be installed. And we take a view that this new government would be more pro-Islamic banking. And we have about 10 billion US dollars worth of financing earmarked for Pakistan over the next 5 to 10 years. And we think that the new government in Pakistan might ask us to provide this financing on Islamic finance terms. So we would like to know about a sukuk, the possibility of issuing a sukuk for energy sukuk at that time for Pakistan. So the reason I'm sharing with you is this multilateral institution, Asian Development Bank, is actually willing to practice Islamic banking and finance if you, Muslims, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, or whosoever would like to practice it. This is not an isolated story of Asian Development Bank. I can share with you, World Bank has similar views. IMF has got similar views. All multilateral institutions, they are willing to accommodate Islamic banking and finance if there is a demand from Muslims. Now, 6 months after this meeting of mine with the then country representative of Asian Development Bank in Islamabad, I didn't hear anything from them. And I happened to get in touch with them and I said, well, you were thinking of issuing a sukuk for the government of Pakistan. And the response was that We had a meeting with the finance minister, and you know who was the finance minister at that time. So we had a meeting with the finance minister, and we were expecting that he would say something about Islamic finance, but he didn't say anything about this. Hence, we have decided to go the way we would like to go, i.e., conventional finance. Right? So those who say that, oh, interest is so prevalent and it's everywhere, and without interest, it is impossible to survive, they're wrong. They do not want to practice Islamic banking and finance. Okay. If you want to practice Islamic banking and finance, the whole world is there to be with you. Right now, I am in the United Kingdom, where Muslims are only 5%, 5% of the total population. We are only about 3 million out of about 62, 63 million total population. And this government, which in Pakistan you would say a kafir government, is accommodating us. A few weeks back, 3 weeks back, the Bank of England actually initiated a new liquidity facility. It's called Alternative Liquidity Facility, ALF, for the institutions which would like to manage their liquidity on Islamic basis. So Bank of England is willing to accommodate Islamic banking and finance. Okay. The government of United Kingdom has issued a sovereign sukuk. Okay. And the British universities, there are 16 academic / professional bodies in the United Kingdom which are offering instructions and trainings in Islamic banking and finance. So I don't think it's difficult. It's impossible to practice Islamic banking and finance if we want to practice it. Okay. So the view is that interest is prohibited and it should be taken out of the economic system as soon as possible. And it's not difficult. Some people say that, if you take out interest, what would happen to the international transactions? International transactions can very easily be restructured. Okay. You must have access to the experts who would restructure the whole deal for you. Okay. So interest in all forms is prohibited in Islam, whether this is modern times or the old times. Now, and we will come to this point later. Okay. But before that, let us go to Islamic banking and finance globally. Okay. Now, we publish a report called Global Islamic Finance Report. This is on one corner, you will see this is the one. So Global Islamic Finance Report 2020, which is going to be officially launched this week. Okay. It estimates the global size of Islamic banking and finance to be $2.733 trillion, $2.733 trillion. That is the size of the Islamic banking and finance globally, which is not an insignificant number. In terms of the percentage or proportion of this with respect to the global financial services industry, this is roughly about 2%. Okay. So 2% of the global financial services industry is Islamic. It's a small proportion, but it's not insignificant. When we say trillion US dollars, trillion is a big number. Okay. And this is not a static kind of number. The next number, on average, Islamic banking and finance in the last 10 years has grown by 11.7% annually. So this 11.7% annual growth, this is very impressive. When we compare this with conventional growth, this is about 3 to 4%. So 3 to 4% conventional and about 12% growth in Islamic banking and finance. There is a very impressive difference between the two. Okay. As a result of this size and growth of Islamic banking and finance, all the countries in the world, they are interested in Islamic banking and finance. Today, we find Islamic banking and finance from USA to Suriname. The Suriname is not a Muslim country. It has become a member of Islamic Development Bank, but otherwise, it's predominantly a non-Muslim. It's a Christian slash Hindu slash Muslim country. Okay. But even in Suriname, which is a small dot on the globe, it has an Islamic bank. Okay. You go to small dots in the ocean, Maldives, you will find an Islamic bank over there as well. You find countries where Islamic banking and finance has become bigger than conventional banking and finance, like Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, Islamic banking size is bigger. It's more than 50% of the total, which means conventional banking and finance is smaller in size than Islamic banking and finance in Saudi Arabia. And this is true in another smaller country like Brunei Darussalam as well. So these two examples are the examples of the countries which adopted what we call a dual banking system. It wasn't a case of change in the legislation with one stroke. Okay, from tomorrow, it would be Islamic. So the model in 2000, the then regime in Pakistan decided to go for dual banking system, i.e., let us allow Islamic banks operating alongside conventional banks. Okay, so from 2000 to 2020, now Islamic banking in the country is about 17% of the total, which is not a bad performance at all. Okay, so this is a global context. It is Islamic banking and finance is a buzzword. Okay, it is increasing in appeal and popularity. In London, now once I took a cab, and this English guy, he was the cab driver, and he started talking to me. It was a long journey for about half an hour, and I told him that I'm an Islamic banking expert, and he said, "Oh, I know a lot about Islamic banking as well." And he was a taxi driver, an English white taxi driver. I was surprised. So I said, "How do you know Islamic banking, and what do you know about Islamic banking?" And he said, "I know that British government is going to issue a sakak." And he's, the sukuk is written like this one. Okay. So he was pronouncing it as sakak. Okay. So at least he was aware that sukuk is an Islamic bond, right? So even taxi drivers in non-Muslim countries, okay, they are aware of Islamic banking and finance. So it is a growing phenomenon. People take a very positive view on Islamic banking and finance. So a lot of things are happening in Islamic banking and finance. It is only the case that we are not aware of these developments. Okay. World Bank and United Nations, okay, they actually worked together to issue a sukuk about 7-8 years back, which would support the immunization programs in different parts of the world. These are multilateral institutions. United Nations Commission for Refugees, UNHCR, has set up a global zakat fund to take care of displaced people in the world. Why zakat for displaced people? Because the first 3 countries on their list, they happen to be Muslim countries where people are displaced. The likes of Syria, the likes of other countries. At that time, Libya was part of this as well. So, and this is another example of the use of Islamic finance for humanitarian purposes by a multilateral institution. Now, United Nations and World Bank, they are working on a project, right, to come up with a vehicle, Islamic finance vehicle, which could be used for meeting 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. That is happening with reference to Islamic finance as well. So a lot of things are happening, okay, and the appeal and popularity of this phenomenon is on a rise. Okay? So in this global context, let us see what is happening in Pakistan. Pakistan is not a bad player in this respect. We, okay, this is this picture. Although the two gentlemen, they are wearing masks, okay, it's not because they are embarrassed or they are ashamed of themselves. This is the situation, right? So we, in September this year, 2020, we held our 10th Global Islamic Finance Award ceremony in Islamabad. And this was our 10th, okay. Before these award ceremony, before this one, we have held these award ceremonies in other parts of the world. The first one was in Muscat, Oman. The second one was in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The third and fourth in Dubai. The fifth one in Bahrain. The sixth one in Jakarta. The seventh one in Kazakhstan, in Astana, now Nur Sultan. Eighth one in Sarajevo. The ninth one in Cape Town. And the 10th one in Islamabad, where we presented an appreciation to the President of Pakistan on behalf of the country for playing a lead role in Islamic banking and finance. And he became the 10th GIFA laureate. Last year, we gave this award to the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, because South Africa issued a sovereign sukuk to support Islamic banking and finance in the country. In 2018, we gave the award, this award, which the President of Pakistan is receiving in this picture, to the President of Bosnia-Herzegovina in Sarajevo. And before that, we gave the award to the President of Djibouti. Before that, we gave it to the President of Indonesia, Joko Widodo. President of Kazakhstan received this award as well, and so on. So Pakistan is actually a country which is playing an important role in the development of Islamic banking and finance, following a model which is known as dual banking system. Dual banking system means the country allows Islamic banks and conventional banks to operate side by side. This is your choice. Now you go to I-8 Markaz, for example, in Islamabad. You will find Islamic banking branches and conventional banking branches almost the same in number. So this is your choice. You want to go to Mizan Bank? Fine. Okay, there is a Mizan Bank branch. You can do Islamic banking with them. You want to open an account with HBL? They have a branch over there. Bank Al Falah, conventional, they have a branch over there. You want to open an account with Bank Islami? They have. Faisal Bank's Barkat branch, which is Islamic branch, that is there as well. So a choice is there. People who would like to do Islamic banking, they can do Islamic banking. The people who would like to remain conventional, this is up to them. Okay. So this is a model which has worked in Pakistan, I should say. Because of this, about 17% of the banking sector is now Islamic. And in this picture, I wanted to share this picture because this shows that the country is committed to Islamic banking and finance. So we have the president himself. We have the president of Faisal Bank, Yusuf Hussain is there. We have the president of Al Falah Bank over there. We have the governor of the central bank, Dr. Raza Bakir there. We have a representative from HBL, their head of Islamic banking. We have the head of Islamic banking at State Bank of Pakistan. We have Dr. Shamshad Akhtar there as well, former governor of the State Bank of Pakistan. So the point I'm trying to make is that we had a representative from Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions in Bahrain. So the commitment is there. So this dual banking system in Pakistan has actually worked. Almost 1/5 of the banking sector in the country is Islamic. Now, if you want to do Islamic banking, the option is there, the choice is there. If you do not want to do Islamic banking and you convert all those Islamic banks in the country, it would be not an ideal state of affairs. So I'm not referring to what is happening in the Supreme Court these days. I am actually giving you the picture of the practice of Islamic banking and finance and the view taken by the government of Pakistan on the process of Islamic banking and finance in the country. No one is against Islamic banking in Pakistan. It's actually a step, it's a practical step. If you convert all the banks into Islamic banks, and if people are not ready, then this could be a misallocation of resources. Right. Now in Pakistan, so after this global context, okay, let us look at Islamic banking and finance in Pakistan. There are three components: Islamic banking, okay, Islamic capital markets, and as part of Islamic capital markets, mudarabas. But I am listing mudarabas separately because this is a very interesting thing happening in Pakistan and it's unique to Pakistan. I have mentioned Islamic banks. Now, Islamic banks in the country, I think there is a chart. Let me see. Yeah. In terms of Islamic banking in the country, there are 3,809 billion rupees worth of assets held by Islamic banking institutions. And what do I mean by Islamic banking institutions? There are 5 fully fledged Islamic banks, and there are 17 conventional banks offering Islamic banking through what is known as Islamic windows. So these Islamic banks and conventional banks, Islamic windows, they have 3.8 trillion rupees under management in terms of Islamic assets. This was the figure for September 2020. So roughly about 4 trillion, Urdu में कहेंगे 4 खरब रुपए जो हैं, they are being held by Islamic banking institutions in the country. Okay. And in terms of the share, this is 16% of the total national banking sector, which is not bad. The annual growth in Islamic banking assets in Pakistan is about 27.2% on an annual basis, which is huge. Now, if we allow Islamic banking assets to continue to grow with 25% on an annual basis, this is a natural process for Islamic banking to become significant in very few years' time. State Bank of Pakistan has set a target for itself that by 2025, the share of Islamic banking in the country should be at least 25%. What does this mean? 1/4 of banking sector in Pakistan is targeted to be Islamic by 2025. Not a bad thing at all. Roughly, this means what? I am walking in Apara and I am finding every 4th person, bankable person, having an Islamic banking account. Not a bad thing at all. So I encounter, this is Ahmad, Muhammad, Sher Khan, and I have Ismail. Ismail is doing Islamic. Then I go Ajab Gul, Muhammadin, Alladita, and Sher Jan. Sher Jan is Islamic. Okay. Not a bad thing at all. So in terms of deposits, about 3 kharab rupees, 3.03 trillion rupees are deposited by people in Islamic banking institutions. Not a bad thing. In terms of growth, 26% annual growth and 17.3% of the total national deposits, banking deposits. Okay. And this has happened only in the last 20 years. Before 2000, Islamic banking was a sham, was a fraud. We started with this one. There was a reason, and so Islamic banking is a fraud because in Pakistan, an attempt to convert the whole system into Islamic actually ended up in a fraud. Okay. And as a result, we actually damaged the whole concept. People on the street today, they say, oh, the Islamic banking is not authentic. Now, in terms of net financing and investments, 2.7 trillion rupees are being used for financing and investments in an Islamic, in a Sharia compliant way, the 14.2% and 30%, nearly 30% growth. Okay. Which means if this continues every third year, this figure would double. Now, when it comes to Islamic capital markets, now Islamic capital markets would have two types of activities. One is Islamic funds, Islamic mutual funds, and sukuk, Islamic bonds. I'm using Islamic bonds, although Islamic bond is not the right definition of a sukuk. But in general, we say a sukuk is an Islamic bond. Now in Pakistan, now the government is issuing almost every month a new sukuk, Ijara sukuk for liquidity management by Islamic banks and other financial institutions. The Islamic asset management industry in Pakistan, it's a hidden one. Okay. No one talks about it. Mudarabas, there are about 22, 23 mudarabas. Mudarabas are a very interesting phenomenon in Pakistan, which is unique to this country because the guys in Pakistan, they came up with a wonderful idea about practicing Islamic financing and investments. In the beginning, the number of, when Mudarabas were started in 1981, 1982, with the flotation of Mudarabas and Mudaraba Companies Flotation and Control Ordinance 1981. Okay, 1980 and 1981, the rules were issued. Following that, there were about 53 Mudarabas set up in the country. Okay, and this progress went up and up until the 1991, when the new finance bill was announced by the then finance minister, Sartaj Aziz, where incentives given to Mudarabas were taken away and Mudarabas' progress started going down. So after a lot of consolidation now, there are about 22, 23 Mudarabas which are doing very well. Some of these Mudarabas are giving you 35% annual dividend, which is not bad. It's a lot better than conventional financial institutions giving you in terms of return. And when I talk about Mudarabas, I'm not referring to this Mudaraba scandal in Pakistan. That was not even a Mudaraba. That was done by some Maulvis, okay, and they should have been booked right from the beginning and put into jail. The authorities in Pakistan failed to take timely action against those Maulvis. They actually earned very bad name for Mudarabas. Mudaraba sector in Pakistan is one of the most tightly regulated sectors in the country. If I want to do a Mudaraba in Pakistan, I cannot do any fraud. SCCP would be behind me, okay? It would catch me from here if I want to do anything. Right? But unfortunately, these Maulvis who set up this fraud business, they brought very bad name to Mudarabas. Otherwise, Mudarabas in Pakistan, they are very, very authentic Islamically and in terms of commitment to regulations and rules in the country. So this is the state of affairs of banking and finance in the country. So we started with some general kind of introduction. I asked this question about interest. Okay. Then we went to Islamic banking and finance globally. I didn't go into a lot of details because in these 90 minutes, it's only uh, a limited amount of time we can spend on a certain topic. So, but I hope that I have given sufficient information to you to understand the Islamic banking and finance in a global context. And then, of course, we talked about Islamic banking and finance in the country as well. Now, I would like to spend some time on riba. I will go back to this question, is interest prohibited in Islam? For me, okay, and as an expert in Islamic banking and finance, I must say that, when I say it's very clear. It is as simple as 1, 2, 3. There is no ambiguity on 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Just like this one, riba is a simple concept which unfortunately in countries like Pakistan has been made controversial by people. Okay. Because of a number of reasons. I think number one, a lot of people, they do not understand the nature of riba. Okay. The best people to understand riba, fortunately or unfortunately, they happen to be Maulvis, the scholars. Other guys, whether I'm a PhD in economics from Cambridge University, if I have not learned this concept from a jurist, from a faqih, then my knowledge on riba is rather incomplete. Whether it is the chief economist of Pakistan, is Minister of Finance, or the guy sitting in planning commission, if they haven't learned riba from a Maulvi, then unfortunately their understanding of riba is incomplete. So for this one, we have to actually talk to the scholars. Okay. What would they say? And I'm summarizing this thing in a contemporary way. Riba is unequal exchange of anything. Okay. So we have to understand, these few things about riba or interest or sood. The word sood in Pakistan is more popularly known. And by the way, okay, we have to be careful about certain words. The Urdu word, as I said, for riba or interest is sood. Some people, their enthusiasm towards sood was very high, even during the time of the British in India. This one guy, I would like to share this story or this incident or this something with you. This one guy, a scholar called Tufail Hushyarpuri. Okay. He was in favor of interest. He had this view that interest was not, this interest was not riba, and hence it wasn't prohibited. And he had a magazine as well. वो एक रिसाला निकालते थे. And out of his enthusiasm, he actually named that magazine Soodmand. This word Soodmand was popularized by him. When I came to know of this link between Soodmand and Sood, I decided, no, Soodmand means mufeed hai. Ye cheez badi Soodmand hai. Ye badi mufeed hai. I decided that in my life, I'm not going to use this word at all. Okay. Because the understanding of the person was wrong. So interest is anything. Riba or interest is unequal exchange of anything. If I give you 10 stocks of Apple company, and I ask you to return 15 stocks of the same company, This would be named as unequal exchange of stocks. That would be prohibited interest. That would be riba based. Okay. If I ask you to give me 1 metric ton of wheat today in exchange for 1.5 metric ton of wheat after 1 year, next year, that would be riba. Okay. If I ask you to give me 1 million rupees today in exchange for 1.2 million rupees after 12 months, this would be riba. Unequal exchange of anything. This is, whenever this happens, unequal exchange of anything, that is riba. And I need to give some own daily life examples as well. When I was growing up, it was quite common. Like, my mother, she wants to make tea, and all of a sudden she finds that sugar is not, she has run out of sugar. So she would ask sometimes a neighborly woman, she would say, can you give me 1 cup of sugar? I would return this when we buy. If it is 1 cup of sugar in exchange of 1 cup of sugar, this is fine. Okay. But if it is, I'm giving you 1 cup of sugar today, or when you buy your 1 cup of when you buy your sugar, you have to give me 2 cups of sugar, that would be riba. And again, I'm coming to the next point now. This would be interesting. Okay. If you have borrowed 1 cup of sugar from Sherjan, if Asad Zia has borrowed 1 cup of sugar from Sherjan, after 1 week, Sherjan goes and says, I'm returning this 1 cup of sugar. And Asad Zia says, oh, my sugar was mote dano wali thi. Ye patli hai, ye. This is, the grains are not as good. Hence, you have to pay me more in quantity. That would be considered as riba as well. Okay. So we have unequal exchange of anything. Okay. That is riba. In modern times, we are referring to money. Okay. It could be stocks. It could be, any contracts. Okay. Futures contracts, for example. By the way, in California, or in US, CME, Commodity Mercantile Exchange, they have issued a futures contract on water. Okay. So if someone is giving you even water in unequal quantity, if you give me 1 bottle of Nestle water today, in exchange for 2 bottles of Nestle water, that would be riba. So 1 kilo of wheat against 2 kilos of wheat, that would be considered as riba. And remember, this is about quantity, number, weight, and measurement, size, 1 yard, 1 meter. If it is 1 meter of silk, in exchange for 2 meters of silk, that would be riba as well. So riba is a nominal concept. It's a quantitative concept. It's not qualitative. People sometimes they say, oh, I am giving you 1,000 rupees today and inflation rate is 10%. When you return it to me, the inflation rate has gone up. It has gone to 20%, and the value of my money has gone down. Hence, you should be paying me more. This is an absurd argument from Sharia viewpoint, because Sharia recognizes quantity only, number only, weight only, not qualities, not value. Because quality, value, and attributes, they are subjective. There is always a possibility of dispute. If I give you $2 today and ask you to return my money, that should be $2, period. Okay, so this is, I think, very important. I want to clarify. Then default penalty. Wherever say, if I have borrowed 1,000 rupees from you for 3 months and I am not able to return, I am defaulting, and you say, okay, you were supposed to pay my money back after 3 months, you have failed to do so. Now you have to give me more than 1,000 rupees which you borrowed. That would be considered as riba. So I think these three things, if we keep in mind, then everything would be clear to us what is prohibited and what is not prohibited. And another thing, important thing is that, when you name something as interest, then that becomes prohibited straight away. In Pakistan, people have, the government and people, they have been very smart. Pakistanis are very smart. They have changed the name. They say markup. It is not interest. Even conventional banks, they would not say we are charging you sood, we are charging you interest. They would say we are charging you markup. Okay, and this has created a lot of confusion. Okay, it is better, by the way, just one step better, not to call it interest, but still it remains interest. It remains sood. You are not calling it, so you are only one out of 100. You are 1% right. 99% you are wrong. Okay. Because naming is very important. Nomenclature is important in any religion. When someone called Yusuf Yuhanna says, I am Muhammad Yusuf, all of a sudden, your perception changes. Okay. So you cannot go against what the person is claiming just by way of changing the name. So when a bank says, I am an Islamic bank, it's a huge statement. You cannot say that you are not an Islamic bank. Okay. So I don't have time, so I won't go into those details. So we have spent 1 hour. Let's go to the next one. Now, trade, on the other hand, so riba is prohibited, trade is encouraged. The whole Islamic history is about trade. A lot of people would say that Islam actually expanded because of trading. Okay. And Islam takes a view that there is no limit to the profit. You can earn 100%, 200%, 300% profit if the market allows you. Okay. And of course, if it's not against the regulations. This is what we call a liberal view taken by Islam on trade. So you can earn as much as profit as dictated by the market. Okay. And this is something I would like to refer. Once the prices in Medina went shot up like anything, and people went to the Prophet ﷺ, and this is how you should regulate. You should put a bar on the prices. The Prophet ﷺ said that I was not sent to regulate prices. Prices should be determined in the markets. So as long as the market allows you, you can earn as much as profit as possible. So although there is no limit on earning profit, by the way, I'm not advocating profiteering. Profiteering is something very different. I must clarify. Profiteering is normally through an artificial phenomenon, by hoarding, for example. Okay, that is something very different. Islam is against hoarding. Zakhira andozi is not allowed in Islam. However, through a market mechanism, through fair play, you can earn whatever you want to earn. So this is one. No restrictions on charging more for selling on credit. This is very important. Okay, my cash price could be different from my credit price. However, Islam says that once you have agreed on a price in a credit sale, you cannot restructure the debt after some time. So if you say that, if you buy this mobile phone on cash, this is for 1 lakh rupees. If you buy it on credit, this is for 1,20,000 rupees. If you agree, fine. However, you cannot change this to 1,50,000 after 6 months. So restructuring of debt is not possible. Okay. And the third step, this is in trading of shares and stocks is acceptable as well. And with this one, I would like to go this next part of my presentation, which is on the sale and purchase of stocks, shares on the, say, Pakistan Stock Exchange. So there are two things which are very important from the viewpoint of trading of stocks, trading of listed stocks. The first thing is called business screen. Any company which is actually involved in Sharia compliant, i.e. halal business, that buying and selling of the stocks and shares of that company is fine. So you basically screen companies. In Pakistan, we don't have very many companies which are involved in the production of haram things. There are some companies, okay, for example, Murray Brewery is a company which is a listed company. It is involved in production of alcohol in Pakistan. So buying and selling of its stocks is not acceptable. However, when you go to the stock exchange, conventional banks, interest-based banks, for example, their stocks you cannot buy and sell because they are involved in interest-based activities. But if this is a cement company, this is a company, a textile company, this is a tech company, their stocks buying and selling is fine. So we basically apply this business screen and we come up with Sharia compliant businesses. Globally, we have now a number of companies which would give you the list of Sharia compliant businesses in the whole world. So for example, on New York Stock Exchange, this one company I know, they have 40,000 stocks which are Sharia compliant. To make you interested, Apple stock, you know, Apple company, that is a Sharia compliant company. So if you want to buy a stock of a tech company, you can buy Apple stock. Just giving you an example, okay? So this is first thing is that you actually screen the stocks from business viewpoint. Any company which is involved in haram activities, you cannot buy and sell stocks of that company. But following that, there is another set of screens, we call them financial screens, okay? So the nature of the business is not sufficient. Okay, there must be some other things. If a business is involved in borrowing and lending on the basis of interest, that is not acceptable. So we apply these financial screens. There are 4 financial screens in general we apply. Okay, and we'll come to that one. These screens ensure that interest-bearing leveraging must be weeded out. Any companies which have a lot of debt borrowed on the basis of interest, their stocks cannot be bought and sold in a Sharia compliant. Highly liquid companies should be ruled out. It is because of the prohibition of buying and selling currencies on a price which is other than the face value. Okay. So again, I'm just listing. There are some technicalities involved, which for this general lecture, I would not be able to go through. And maybe if there are some questions at the end, I would be happy to answer. Trading in debt must be avoided. So these are Sharia concerns. Okay, so basically interest, then buying and selling of currencies, that is a Sharia concern, and buying and selling of debt, that is a Sharia concern. So And the fourth financial screen makes sure, because you won't find any business in the world which is 100% Sharia compliant. There would be some activities somewhere where there would be some breach of Sharia principles. So if you identify those activities, for them, you should be giving some charity. You should be purifying non-halal income. Okay. So this is, these four financial screens are important. And what we say, okay, to quantify this thing, we say that debt equity ratio, cash plus interest bearing securities to equity ratio, receivables to equity ratio, these three ratios must be less than 1/3, less than 33.33%. So if, number one, the business of the company, the share of which you are interested in is halal, okay, so you will choose that company. After that, you would look into their financials. If their debt equity ratio, cash plus interest bearing securities divided by market cap, and receivables to market cap, if these are less than 33.3%, you say that this is a Sharia compliant stock, and hence you are allowed to buy and sell the stock of that company. Okay, so there are different Sharia screens being used in the world. One is used by Securities Commission of Malaysia. Okay, the other one is S&P Dow Jones Sharia Index. So they have their own screens. Then we have MSCI Islamic Index screens. They have two. One general one, then they have M series. Then we have FTSE Sharia Global Equity Index. So there are different screens, and you will find that they are more or less the same. There are small differences. In case of, say, S&P Dow Jones, it says, the first screen says total debt divided by market capitalization should be equal to or less than 33%. The second one, it says cash plus interest bearing securities divided by market capitalization should be less than or equal to 33%. The third one says accounts receivable divided by market capitalization should be less than or equal to 49%. Okay. Now, in case of MSCI general one, instead of market capitalization in the denominator, they use total assets. This is the difference. Look, total assets. And here they say 33%, they say 33.33%. Small difference. It's difference in statistical difference only. 33%, 33.33%. Here they say 49%, here they say 33.33%. So there are minor differences which are acceptable, by the way. Okay. These are methodological differences. Otherwise, the point I'm trying to make is that there are well-defined rules to determine whether a stock, a share is Sharia compliant or not. So if you are interested in investing in shares, then you have to follow. And if you want to observe Sharia requirements, then you have to follow these rules. Okay. Important thing is this one, if there is an income which is haram in those companies, you must purify 5% of the income. Any company which has up to 5% of haram income, you can still buy and sell their stock. However, you have to purify, you have to give that haram income, which is up to 5%, to a charity. You have to purify that haram income from the dividends. Okay. And there are well-defined rules how you do that dividend purification. There are formulas which are accepted by the scholars which sit on the Sharia board of a global organization called Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions, which is based in Bahrain. So there are very well-defined rules for Islamic finance, for shares, for stocks, for everything. So it's not something which is just happening. Sometimes people say that, you go to this Maulvi, he issues a fatwa and you do Islamic banking. That's not the case. It's a global phenomenon. If there are 2.733 trillion US dollars worth of assets, there must be regulation. And this regulation comes from Sharia bodies, from governments, as well as from multilateral institutions. IMF, for example, says any country where the share of Islamic banking is more than 16%, we would include Islamic finances assessment as part of our FSAP. FSAP is a program which is called Financial Sectors Assessment Program, which is a mandatory thing for the countries which have gone to the IMF. So for example, in Pakistan, IMF program is being implemented, it's being run. Now, if IMF decides to go for an FSAP, Financial Sector Assessment Program, as part of this FSAP, it would assess the Islamic banking and finance sector. Okay. Now, I refer to Islamic fund management industry in Pakistan. I said, okay, there are about 400 million worth of assets under Islamic mutual funds industry, which is around 10% of the national mutual funds industry. It's a lot of money by the Mizan Islamic Investment Fund Management Company. It is one of the largest Islamic fund management companies in Pakistan. UBL, it has a very significant assets under management under its Islamic mutual funds products. So Islamic fund management in Pakistan is progressing very well. Okay, and so Islamic banking is the most visible one. You know, when we talk about Islamic banking and finance, Islamic banking, because you can see the branches of Al Baraka Bank, branches of Mizan Bank, branches of Dubai Islamic Bank, branches of Bank Islami, and branches of MCB Islamic Bank. These 5 Islamic banks, okay, they are there, so they are more visible. However, the asset management industry, Islamic asset management industry in Pakistan is very vibrant as well. So those of you who would like to invest in Sharia compliant shares and assets, you can go to these mutual funds, Islamic mutual funds, and many of them, they are offering very good returns. In addition to, you know, I said Mudarbas, they are offering very lucrative returns as well. Now, with this one, I would like to stop. And maybe there are a lot of questions, and it would be a good idea to take your questions and end this monologue here to start a dialogue.
Yes, sir. Sheikh Jan Saab, he had a question.
All right.
Sir, it was very, very knowledgeable, sir. Very, I mean, informative for us to understand Islamic banking. So my question here is about Islamic banking here in Pakistan. What are the, I mean, the initiatives recently they're taken for the enhancement and I mean just making it popular for the people to just go into into these banks. What are those steps taken in Pakistan now recently, if you just elaborate?
As I said, the authorities, their job is not to push the people to go into one form or the other form of banking. The concerns of the governments all over the world are on financial inclusion. If I give you a reference to financial inclusion, the governments would like to bring those people who are outside formal banking and finance sector to come into banking and finance. Okay, so i.e. reducing financial exclusion in the country. For this, the State Bank of Pakistan is playing an instrumental role, increasing the number and share of those who are outside banking sector to bring them into this banking sector. Now, interestingly, a lot of governments and multilateral institutions, they take a view that Islamic banking and finance can be used as a tool to bring the people outside banking and finance into banking net. And one thing which we have been involved lately, I can give example of that one. Asian Development Bank hired us for a project for 5 countries. They call 5 DMCs, developing member countries: Pakistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan. So these 5 stands. And the objective of the project was to increase awareness and work for capacity building of Islamic finance so that it leads to more financial inclusion in these countries. So as part of this project, we did a number of activities, public awareness programs amongst women. We used to call them social evenings. So we our teams went to villages, held small meetings of about 20 to 30 housewives, and we informed them about Islamic banking and finance. Interestingly, they were very much interested in Islamic banking and finance. And a lot of these women, they said they were not aware that these opportunities were there for women. So this kind of activities, are being undertaken by the multilateral institutions, by the government as well, and by the State Bank. State Bank of Pakistan champions this one. It has its own financial literacy program. One such program, I think, is called Youth Financial Literacy Program, which is spearheaded by the Central Bank, by State Bank of Pakistan, and it has branches. Branches means, it has teams in different parts of the world. And the idea is to educate youth, children, school children, for example, on different aspects of financial affairs. The State Bank actually came up with this very innovative idea called Sikku. जो सिक्का नहीं होता, उससे they actually created a cartoon called Sikku. So you talk to Sikku actually. So Sikku, you ask Sikku, रुपया किसे कहते हैं, right? And Sikku would then answer you, रुपया ये इसको कहते हैं. So this kind of literacy programs are being done by the State Bank in Pakistan, and with the help of multilateral institutions, a number of activities are ongoing to ensure that financial inclusion takes place in the country. And as part of this financial inclusion program, Islamic banking and finance is being promoted as well. I hope this was your question and I have been able to answer.
Asad Jasab.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a very informative lecture, sir. Actually, there was some doubts in my mind when Mizan Bank actually started their services in Pakistan. At that time, I asked 3 questions from their regional manager. That what actually the bank standing is, and different kind of a question being asked, but actually he never satisfied him. But your lecture, although clear my different kind of a doubts, sir. Yeah, thank you for this, sir. Sir, my question is about the car ijara. Different kind of banks are offering to the customer car ijara, but still there is a fixed markup. Don't you think that this is not the Sharia compliance thing, sir?
Thank you very much, Asad Saab, for this very interesting question. This is something of concern to a lot of people. You know, this similarity of pricing between conventional banking products and Islamic banking products. Referring to this ijara, car financing, what happens? You go to Mizan Bank, for example, and you say, I would like to get financing for buying a car. They would say, okay, they would ask you certain questions, which car, which model, and so, and which color, or they will take all those details from you. And based on this one, okay, depending on which branch you go to, okay, but I'm just summarizing the things, okay. Either they themselves or they would ask you to go to that showroom and choose a car, okay. And the way this happens, okay, you make your decision, and the invoice is actually raised in the name of Mizan Bank. Okay. So Mizan Bank receives the invoice and pays the money. This means Mizan Bank actually buys the car, okay. And then there is a lease agreement, ijara agreement between you and the bank. So you are actually as someone leasing the car, so you use the car. Now, in this whole thing, you have to pay a monthly installment. That monthly installment, okay, has two components. One is a fixed component, okay, and the other one is a variable component, okay. Or even before that, I would say that, you know, this monthly installment has got two portions. What one is called in their accounting books, part of the monthly installment you pay, the bank keeps in a pot within its system as repayment of the price. You know, the price they have paid, so that money would go into that pot. The remaining one is with respect to the return the bank wanted to earn on its investment. Okay. So this second component normally is linked to an interest-based benchmark. It could be Kaibor, it could be in other countries, Clibor, and so on. And people, they get confused. Okay. They say that, oh, actually they are charging us interest. Now, there is a very clear understanding amongst the Sharia circles that interest rate can be used as a benchmark when you are pricing. And the example they give is that, you know, if there is one business which is Sharia compliant, say, I'll give example from UK. So there is one halal butcher and the other one is a haram butcher. You know, they sell pork, etc. as well. Now, if I am investing in halal butcher, I can tell the butcher that actually my return on my investment should not be less than what the other butcher is earning on its haram activities. Okay. This is because at the end of the day, this is only benchmarking. Okay. And benchmarking is, it's just the a kind of standard. You know, this is, if this person is earning this much, I would like to earn this much as well. Okay. It's only this thing. Otherwise, what is happening between you and the bank, it is Sharia compliant. The bank buys a car, okay, it's in its own name, and then leases it out to you and says that, you know, for this one, you have to pay me the rental, okay. And bank divides for its own accounting purposes that rental into two components. One is used to retrieve the price which it has paid to the car company, and the other one should determine the return on that investment, which comes in the form of rental from you. Okay. So this seems a bit complicated. Otherwise, from the Sharia viewpoint, I must say that this is very clear. Okay, whatever you pay to the bank, that is rental. And remember, one thing which I mentioned in the discussion on riba, that you can charge as much profit as possible. There is no limitation on this one. Now, if I have got a house and you would like to rent this house from me, and I say the monthly rental would be 1 lakh rupees. Okay. And you say that, oh, actually I like the house, but the rental you are charging is very high. In that case, okay, you have a choice. You don't rent the house from me. But if you are adamant, if you want to rent the house from me, and I say that I would not be renting it to you for less than 1 lakh rupees, then okay, there is nothing wrong with that. Similarly, okay, these banks, because Islamic banks are in banking sector, okay, they would like to earn a return which is similar to what is the other banks earning in the market anyway. Okay, so for that they come up with a rental in ijara, car ijara, which is more or less the same as what other banks are charging in the market. That is acceptable from Sharia viewpoint. Okay. You are just pricing it benchmarked with the market norm. Okay. And as I said, okay, this is something which doesn't have Sharia concerns. Okay. And this is accepted by the central bank. This is accepted, this is endorsed by the Sharia board of the central bank as well, which comprises some very eminent Sharia scholars. So again, just to summarize, from the viewpoint, your relationship with the bank is what? Bank, one party is lessor, the other party is lessee. That's it. This is what. How you price it? Okay, pricing is done with respect to the market norm. Right. That's it. Okay. Otherwise, okay, I don't think there is any Sharia concern in it. Right. And this is something I am saying on the basis of my understanding of the whole transaction. I don't work for Mizan Bank, okay, or I don't work for any other Islamic bank. Okay. Because once I can share with you, I was working with one of my professors on a transaction who was a great Sharia scholar of his time. He just passed away a few months back. And we were working on this Islamic hedge fund. And there was this one aspect he had a different view. And I was pushing him that no, he should accept my view. And he said, Humayun, remember one thing. You are going into your grave and I am going into my grave. Okay. In my grave, you are not going to help me, or in your grave, I'm not going to help you. Okay. So I have a view which is different from you. So I am going to take a decision on the basis of my understanding, okay, not on the basis of your understanding. So whatever I am saying, okay, I have not taken any money from Mizan Bank or Bank Islami or whatsoever. My professional judgment on this one is that you have to, from Sharia viewpoint, you have to look at your relationship. The bank is leasing you something and says, for this lease, you have to pay me this much money. If you accept this one, this is entirely in line with Sharia. Okay. And because this is an ijara agreement, in ijara agreement, the rental can be changed after some time, after 3 months, 4 months, 1 year, or whatever. In my lecture, I said that, credit price can be higher than the cash price. However, you cannot change the credit price after you have entered into the contract. So I said restructuring of debt is not possible. However, in case of ijara, it's not a credit sale. This is a leasing arrangement. Leasing arrangement repricing is possible. So when I rent you my house, After 3 months, after 1 year, whatever is written in the tenancy agreement, I can change the rental as per the contractual arrangement between us, which is not true in case of Sharia compliant credit sale, where once the price is agreed, that becomes a fixed thing. You cannot change it. Okay. I hope I clarified this one.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, sir.
Iftikharuddin sir.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. I am Iftikharuddin, Department of Communication Security, Cabinet Division. Sir, lot of misconception has been cleared by your informative lecture. We have all utilized a lot of things. Sir, a lot of my question has already been answered by Asad Zia's question, but I will utilize these opportunities. Sir, purchasing of property particularly and other thing on installment basis and on net basis, there is a lot of difference between prices. On net basis, you have to pay less, but on installment basis, property which is not possible for me or average income person on net cases, we already try to purchase on installment. But some ulama has their own viewpoint. Some are asking this is according to the Islamic principle. Some are saying this is not according to the principle of Islam. Sir, what are your views in this regard? Thank you, sir.
Iftikharuddin Saab, thank you very much for your question. I enjoyed the question, and I hope that you would enjoy the answer as well. Whenever it comes to the financial matters, I must emphasize that we should seek advice from those scholars who specialize in what is known as fiqhul muamalat al-maliyya, the jurisprudence of financial transactions. Not all ulama, they have this expertise. Okay. So my answer would be based on the experts of muamalat al-maliyya, fiqhul muamalat al-maliyya. There is no disagreement amongst scholars and jurists of any school of thought, whether this is Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Jafriya, Zaidiya, etc., that credit sale, which you are mentioning, installments, okay, can have a different price than the cash price. Normally, a credit price would be higher than the cash price anyway, and it makes sense. Okay. So from Sharia viewpoint, there is no problem. Okay, those scholars who say that there is a problem, I think, okay, they are not experts in fiqhul muamalat al-mali. And I tell people, don't go to your Muqami masjid for this one, because the guy over there, he's a very good khatib, he's a very good imam. He would be able to guide you on matters related with wuzu, namaz, etc. But when it comes to the financial matters, this may not be his area of expertise. And hence, okay, we should be very careful. I would be bold as to give an example. I have respect for a lot of views taken by Ghamdi Saab. Okay. However, his understanding of financial matters is rather limited. I was watching one of his programs. He's a great scholar. I have no issues with that one. So I was watching one of his programs and someone asked him about interest. And he said, to my horror, I wasn't expecting this thing from him. He said in Urdu, he said, Sood dena haram nahi hai, lena haram. Right? And I was, as I said, I was disappointed because his understanding of interest was shallow. I spoke to one of my Sharia scholar friends, and he said, we shouldn't blame him because he's not an expert in fiqhul muamalat al-maliyah. He should have refrained from giving answer. If you ask me, masaile wuzu or tayammum, I would say this is not my area of expertise. Okay. But if you ask me questions about fiqhul muamalat al-maliyah, I know. So I would give you answers. Okay. So in the circles of fuqaha specializing in fiqhul muamalat al-maliyah, there is no ambiguity at all that installment pricing, selling in installments is acceptable. Okay. And the price could be higher. Why? Because Islam has a value for time. And this is something I would like to clarify because a lot of people, they have confusion. In Islam, there is no recognition of time value of money. However, Islam values time. And because of this valuation of time, it is acceptable to charge a higher price if the buyer is going to pay after some time. However, that price which the two parties have agreed, it cannot be increased after you have signed this contract. If you increase that price, that would come under the rules of riba interest. That will become interest. So if you are buying, say, a plot of land in Bahriya town, and these guys, they tell you that, this is a 3 years, 5 years plan, and this is the total price you are going to pay. Say this is 1 crore rupees, and you pay in these installments. This is acceptable from Sharia viewpoint. Now, the question arises, if you miss your installment, and these guys, they say, oh, because you have missed this installment, you have to pay us more. That is called riba. That is called interest. That is called sood. This is something people should be avoiding. Because Islam recognizes time. You have already charged me more for this time. And for some reasons, it was not under my control. This was COVID-19, for example, and I have not been able to pay my installment. Okay. So you cannot charge me higher because of this default. If they do this thing, this is categorically prohibited in Islam. This was actually what is known as riba al-jahiliyyah. Riba al-jahiliyyah, there is no disagreement among scholars of any time and any generation that riba al-jahiliyyah was unambiguously prohibited by Islam. So wherever there is a default penalty, that brings the whole arrangement under the ambit of riba al-jahiliyyah, that becomes haram. So if Bahriya town asks you to pay more for missing an installment, that is not acceptable. That is riba. However, if the cash price is 85 lakh and they say you pay us in 5 years, this is 1 crore price. If you accept it, this is fine. And this is what all the banks are doing anyway.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir, Hafiz Ghulam Mustafa Javed, sir.
All right, okay. I think I know Hafiz Ghulam Mustafa Javed.
Thank you, Dr. Hamaya.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Thank you, sir. So kind of you. Very happy to see you after a quarter century, obviously. So you make the very complex or very difficult subject very simple and nice blend of the theory and practice as well, and particularly bringing the hadith of the Prophet that the fixing of the price might be participant first time listening such a hadith, that there are such hadiths as well. Thank you. My question is that would you like to tell us something about the profile of Islamic banking in Pakistan regarding the microfinancing, and if it has any edge over the conventional banking? Thank you.
First of all, I must say that, it is my genuine and sincere pleasure to see you after a very long time. For others, okay, Hafiz Ghulam Mustafa Javed Sahib, he was my senior in Islamic University. So he's like my big brother. And I was looking forward to seeing him in Islamabad last time when I visited the city. But for some domestic reasons, sir, you couldn't come. So I am thankful to STI for giving me this opportunity to आपकी ज़ियारत हो गई है इस तरह से. So this is what. The question regarding Islamic microfinance, I must say that Islamic microfinance is the weakest link or one of the weakest links in Islamic banking and finance. When we talk about this globally, 2.733 trillion US dollars Islamic AUM, only about 1.5% of that one is in Islamic microfinance. So Islamic microfinance sector all over the world is underdeveloped. And Pakistan is not an exception. In Pakistan, we have, like NRSP Bank, they have this Islamic microfinance component. We do not have a fully fledged Islamic microfinance bank as such in Pakistan. We have Islamic microfinance non-bank institutions which are offering their services on a limited scale to wherever they are offering these services. When it comes to the offering of Islamic microfinance services in Pakistan, in terms of pricing, they are not very different from conventional. Okay. Of course, okay, they would use Sharia compliant tools like Murabaha in most cases. And on a very limited scale, there has been use of Salam as well. Okay. But in terms of pricing, they're more or less the same as conventional. I would like to share my own experience in the provision of Islamic microfinance in Pakistan. Okay. About 5-6 years back, I attempted to set up a microfinance mudarba in Pakistan. And that was the time when I did a lot of research on the Islamic microfinance practices in the country. As someone who comes from an academician background, I used to have a problem with very high interest / return charged by the microfinance providers in excess of 30%. And I had a serious problem with that. This one guy, he took me to this one recipient of microfinance in Azad Kashmir. When I shared my discomfort with charging so much, he said, okay, let me take you to this one lady who received money from us for in microfinance. So this lady, she said, she actually got for about 30%. It was 2% on a monthly basis. Okay. So when we compound the thing, this becomes about 30%. So 30% for me, it was a very significant rate. So I asked that lady, what was her experience? She said, these guys, they gave me 50,000 rupees. And with the 50,000 rupees, I bought choose chicken, basically. And there were certain layers and certain broilers. And she said, after some time, I started selling the eggs. And my chickens, okay, they would give me on average about 30 eggs on a daily basis. And at that time, she shared with me the income. So as a result of all these things, selling eggs and then selling chicken for meat as well. She said within 1 year, I paid back this 2% monthly return to these guys, which was about 30%. And now I have got this shed, which is completely my own. So then I realized that actually, although it looks exorbitant rate, but the kind of benefit this is providing to people on a sustainable basis, this is remarkable. So Islamic microfinance institutions, they would provide financing for a return of about 25 to 30% as well, which is comparable with conventional. I actually, as part of that exercise, I spoke to quite a few shopkeepers as well. And when I did this calculation, to my horror, I found out that in small shops, the return on capital is more than 300%. So out of that 300% return on capital, if they are giving 30% or 40% to the finance providers, this is not a bad thing at all. How this is 300%? So I actually, I'll give example, because this is a microfinance thing. This one guy, he gets 50,000 from somewhere and he buys toys for children. And these toys, they're for 200 rupees, 100 rupees, 50 rupees or whatever. On a daily basis or on a weekly basis, this guy would be buying from the thok, wholesale, and would be selling. So that one toy, he would buy for 50 rupees. Okay. And would sell it for 120 rupees. And the return on that inventory within a week is about 1000%. So out of that very high return, if they give a return of 30% to the finance provider, they don't think this is too high. Okay. So this is actually the benefit of trading, the benefit of doing business. Okay. When you are doing business by getting the money from somewhere, okay, because you get a lot of return, you don't mind sharing that return with the finance providers. In case of Pakistan, coming back to now, I have taken a lot of time. In case of Pakistan, the provision of Islamic microfinance is rather limited, okay, but it's increasing. The State Bank of Pakistan is actually encouraging new players to come into this field, but somehow the interest on the supply side is limited. I on a personal level and in my business, I am involved in a number of microfinance initiatives in Indonesia, Islamic microfinance initiative. And their Islamic microfinance is a big thing. Okay. Even the banks, they are involved in microfinance. In Pakistan, the high street banks, the likes of HBL and others, they are not allowed to do microfinance because microfinance is a very separate kind of activity. But in countries like Indonesia, in countries like even Malaysia, the banks are involved in microfinance activities, and I can tell you that their profitability is phenomenal. And my advice to the government of Pakistan or the authorities over here would be to study these models elsewhere and see how these guys are implementing microfinance. In case of Indonesia, they are now thinking of issuing a sukuk, the proceeds of which would be used for Islamic microfinance activities. So there are a number of examples of best practices in different parts of the world. These must be studied to improve and enhance Islamic microfinance offering in Pakistan. And I'm sure there is a lot of scope for this one in the country.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr.
Why Islamic banks sell their Islamic products on high rates as compared to conventional banks? Is it not discouraging people who want to avail the services of Islamic bank instead of conventional banks?
Right. No, again, thank you very much for asking this question. This question was very much relevant about 10, 15 years back, when consistently Islamic banking products used to be more expensive than conventional banking products. However, this has changed in a lot of countries already, and in other countries, it is changing rapidly. The price difference between Islamic and conventional products has gone down. I remember in UK, HSBC, when it started offering Islamic mortgages, it used to charge a lot higher than the conventional mortgage, its own conventional mortgage. But a time came when the conventional and Islamic mortgages, they were almost similarly priced. In UK, once again, Al Rayyan Bank, which is a fully fledged Islamic bank in the country, its Islamic mortgages called home purchase plans, they are actually considered as more competitive as compared to many conventional mortgages. And i.e. they are less expensive as compared to many conventional products in the market, and hence many non-Muslims, for whom Sharia is not a concern, they actually went for this option. So I would say that, the price differential has gone down in a lot of countries. And this price differential was primarily because of the higher costs faced by these banks. Islamic banks, even now, in terms of size, they are smaller than their conventional counterparts. I'll give you the biggest Islamic bank in Pakistan is Mizan Bank. And this is not the biggest bank in the country. Biggest bank in the country is another one. And we know in economics, there's something called economies of scale. So if you are a small player in the market, there would be a lot of costs which would hit you more than the similar costs hitting a well-established larger entity. So because of that diseconomies of scale, a lot of Islamic banks in the past, they used to charge significantly higher than their conventional counterparts. And of course, they faced criticism. This question is a reflection on that criticism in a way. So the banks, they actually started, Islamic banks started working on this one. So there was a global drive to increase the size of Islamic banks. A consolidation process started in a number of countries. I'll give you an example of Dubai, UAE. In case of UAE, there was a recent merger of Noor Bank and Dubai Islamic Bank. So with this merger, Dubai Islamic Bank has become a very big player in the market. So its competitiveness has improved. Similarly, there was another merger before that, which gave rise to another bigger Islamic bank. I am aware of a big merger going on right now in Indonesia. Their Bank Sharia Mandiri, which is the largest Islamic bank in the country, BRI Sharia and BNI Sharia. These three Islamic banks, they are merging to create a very big Islamic bank in the country that would be called Bank Sharia Indonesia. So with this size advantage, Islamic banks would be able to offer more competitively priced Islamic financial products. And I hope that with this kind of developments, Islamic banking and finance will become better and more competitive in due time. The markets where the size and share of Islamic banking is still small, the customers of Islamic banks, unfortunately, would continue to face price disadvantages. I hope I clarified my point.
Sir, can we use just in place of riba, usury, in place of interest or riba, can we use usury?
You finish your question?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to know this word.
All right. Thank you very much. I am actually happy that you asked this question. I abhor the word usury as a translation of riba. Okay. All those translators of the Quran, the likes of Marmaduke Pickthall, Allama Yusuf, etc. They actually used wrong translation of the word riba. Riba is not usury. Okay. And this mistake was not a deliberate mistake, because those days in English lexicography, there was huge confusion about usury anyway. The word interest is a new one. The word interest started becoming popular in English language only from the start of the 20th century. Before that, the word usury was more prevalent. Okay. And usury at that time was used to include interest of very high return, a high rate, and lower rate as well. But from the 20th century, a new distinction started coming in the language. So whenever someone would like to refer to excessive interest, they would use the word usury. And normal interest, they would use the word interest. This distinction is not there in Arabic language. There is only one word, riba. Okay, and that means interest. I said that means unequal exchange of anything. And because we refer to money, unequal exchange of money, even if that money is small one. So the word interest should be used rather than usury.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, are there any more questions? Okay, so it seems that it appears that there are no more further questions, no hands are raised, and no comments are passed on the chat. Thank you so much, sir. It was such a good discussion, and personally, I quite enjoyed it. I don't know about the participants, but it was very good. Thank you so much, sir, for giving us this time from your very, very busy schedule, and we hope we will be requesting you further also for different sessions of, but I will definitely call you a month or two before that, inshallah. So thank you so much for coming here, sir.
No, thank you very much for inviting. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that this was a useful session. And I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes this session useful for us intellectually and in terms of practice. And of course, given these uncertain times and the especially for myself, the stage of life I have entered recently, we should be looking into wherever we are moving to. And so Allah Ta'ala makes this an act for reward for all of us. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Allah bless you with good health, sir. We hope that we wish you a very good health, sir, inshallah. Thank you so much, sir, for coming here. And dear participants, thank you all for coming and joining this session and making it a very good discussion. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Allah Hafiz.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.